And it's amazing how you can just turn one tool to another, or one
That's
medium to another.
this is a good place to mention the obvious that,
Mm-hmm.
I could be reading Jennifer's tweets or Samantha's tweets from now until doomsday, and I would never get a sense of who they are. Rose, my God, I'd never get a sense of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get some sense of, obviously, um, but none of us are Hemingway. None of us can write his famous 6 word story. Um, and 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 we wouldn't have even gotten to know Hemingway actually through tweets. But you listen to people, and it just comes through.
It really does. And just like you said, George, like we can watch someone's timeline forever and we'll never know how they are, what they are about, or what they're passionate about or anything until we connect
Exactly.
on in rooms.
Yeah, when you hear the passion in the voice, man.
Mm.
I mean, you hear Jennifer talk about Web3, you can hear the passion in her voice. You know, it's just it's just amazing, and it really is infectious. Let me mention some of my history here because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's instructive. My first exposure to what's now called social audio was 53 years ago. A friend of mine, Ron Richards, came to me. We were both working for the same company, and he said he has this crazy idea that maybe we could put people on telephone conference calls, people who have special interests like photography and world travel and gourmet cooking were our first ones. We could put them together on telephone conference call, and they'd be able to talk with each other and learn from each other and uh, have a ball. And I was going for a PhD in partly in group dynamics. I had years of training in group dynamics, and I said, "Nah, Ron, it can't work because you need facial expressions, you need body language, you need gestures. It won't work." And he said, "Let's try it." So we tried it. I ran my first conference call, and it worked spectacularly, spectacularly. The rest is history. We did those for a while. Then it went into telephone focus groups, and then customer seminars. When I was doing audio only telephone focus groups, I could get stuff out of focus groups that no other moderator in the world could get. And people hired me for that and made millions of dollars doing it um, because they opened up on the phone in ways that they would not open up face to face. You could even mix teenage girls and boys, which you can't do in real life face to face. Too much posing, stuff like that. You can do it on the telephone. So it opened people up to a degree because of the psychological safety. There was psychological safety. Everybody was in a different city. So sometimes they were all in a different country. So they just opened up on the phone in ways that they never opened up in face to face focus groups or subsequently Zoom focus groups.
Wow, it's so interesting to hear your story, George, about social audio. That it's the same cues that you used a long time ago, and they're still they can still be used today. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
It works better even today.
Just
And
I
we
mean,
want
can.
back
to.
in the day, the telephone conference calls had a huge amount of static and whistling noises and feedback, and it was horrible, horrible.
Mm,
And 1 out of 5 calls totally fell apart into feedback noises, and we'd have to start the phone call again. It was just awful. And despite all of that, because a very robust medium,
mm-hmm.
it sometimes spaces used to bomb out in the early days of spaces. People would just start them up again. They'd start from right from where they were. Boom, they would be into it again instantly. So it's a very robust medium.
It is, and it survived all this time. No other, you
Oh,
can't say the
yep.
same about any other medium. We cannot say the same.
Well,
Can
maybe
I,
radio.
I wanted to contribute to
Sure.
jump on what George was saying, in that the way you get people to open up. So as a reporter, you might think that, like, I was covering, if you go and cover, if you're covering the police or anything, you may see something, that intrigue, kicks off the interest or idea for a story, but then you use the phone, you know, and I found that sometimes people would open up more, when I was doing investigative stories about the bad things some companies were doing, and one source would tell me about another source, would tell me about another source, and in a way comparable to the way Twitter Spaces works, in that if I go on Twitter Spaces and I see Samantha in a space, I see and Jennifer speaks, I say, huh, I'm going to follow Jennifer. And then, when I see a space with Jennifer, I'm going to start listening to the space with Jennifer. So that what you said about the voice, is really true, and is a great way, as a reporter, that I got people to
Yeah, when
tell me
you're
stuff.
when you're in their face with a reporting pad, that's
Hmm.
one thing. But when you're on the phone, they're in their own comfortable environment. They are feeling safe. They don't. You're just a disembodied voice, and they can open up to you in a way that, if you in their face, this. Oh Jesus, she's writing stuff down. She's writing down every word I'm saying. Oh
Well,
my
they
God,
were smart enough. They would hear me typing and say, "Are you writing this down?"
right, right.
Rose, Rose, I have a
Yes,
question for you.
yes.
As a journalist, how did Spaces help you deliver your message, or how did it help you as a journalist with reaching out to people, or however it is? How did that help you?
I can give two examples. In one, uh, I wanted to jump on what was happening in the Ukraine, and I was seeing, when I watched the daily, cable reports, I would see, even if it was a woman host, the men they were talking to about the national political ramifications of what was going on
Hmm.
were often, you know, they were men, and mostly white men. And I said, like, gee, there has to be some female, some women, experts, professors, analysts out there. And I started to put together a woman to follow Ukraine list, a Twitter list. And I was in a space talking, and they were talking about Ukraine, and I connected with one of the women there who's a professor in Italy, and she, it turns out, does a podcast with a woman in New York City, and in New York City, called the Kremlin Files. So these were people I wanted to know, and they were connected to a journalist in the Ukraine who had studied in Italy and knew Italian. So that fortuitous, connection happened on Spaces, and then within like a week or two, I had a space, my first space on the Ukraine, and it had 11,000 live views. Um, so the power, and I couldn't have, as somebody in New York, in Connecticut, on the East Coast, and not working for a publication right now, regularly, have had that access. Uh, I have another story to give, but that can be later. But just, I connected with a journalist in the Ukraine, who now has like 400,000 followers through Twitter Spaces.
Wow. And would you have been able to do that if it wasn't for social audio, for example?
In some cases, people, like, I'll reach out to people, and they've heard of the Woman to Follow movement,
Mm-hmm.
and they are following me on Twitter Spaces, and that means that I can DM them.
Mm-hmm.
And, they know that I'm a journalist. They might have heard of me, and I get some access. But this would have been really tough because I didn't know the Kremlin, the people who are, the two women who are hosting the Kremlin Files, nor did I know this journalist in Ukraine. I mean, this was during wartime that I got this, I got her to join my show.
Mm-hmm. It's just amazing listening
Mm.
to your stories, Rose. Like every time you come up to Spaces and I see your guests, it's fascinating. Sometimes I really get goosebumps that this was amplified because of social audio. Like I wouldn't have had access to this, for example, to you, to your guests, unless I follow you in other social mediums or I find you on YouTube somehow. But because of social audio, as a woman, as someone who enjoys journalism and enjoys hearing from different perspectives, I know you also interviewed someone who had a Nobel Prize, who's a Nobel Prize winner as well.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
As part of this live stream show that I was doing on COVID, uh, I I saw that her name is Maria Ressa, and for years she was a CNN correspondent in the Far East, mostly in Asia. But she had returned to the Philippines when uh, President Duterte came into power, and she started her own media network called Rappler. And they were critical of the government and the way they were handling drug dealers and corruption. So she was under attack. She's been under attack for some years and spent a night in jail. And she followed me, and I heard on I guess it was the radio on NPR that she was about to be in court. And I texted her and said, would you be on our show, our COVID show, which was about all aspects of COVID. So it wasn't, specifically about everything happening in medicine. And she said yes. I called my, the host, and he said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "No, no." Um, you you know,
Wow.
yeah. And a year, and she did an hour and a half show with us. She was amazing. Her name is Maria Ressa, and she won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, along with
Rose, that
the editor of
go ahead.
the Russian newspaper. So, and I mean, so I listened to it. So it was both things. It was being active, having a reputation I think, as a journalist and creating this hashtag, but also being part of at that time, well, a live stream, in this case for the Ukraine show, doing it as part of my live stream show. In my case, I started with a live stream show a year ago. And since then, I've also done Twitter Spaces.
There's a lesson to be learned from what Rose just said that our listeners can learn, and that is that people are way more accessible than you think they are.
Yes.
They really are, and they really want to get their message across, and they are just find them and invite them, be bold about it. And 2 days after Nixon announced his wage price freeze, I called up the leading economists in the United States, and I invited them to a conference call on the wage price freeze. And 2 days after that, they were all on, and they gave us permission to publish it. So Milton Friedman and some other very famous economists, they're there, and you can find them, you can get them, and you're promising them not your individual brilliance, you're promising them each other. So when you call them, you say, "How would you like to be in a discussion with a bunch?" These people. They say, "Oh my God, yeah, I only get to speak to these people like once a year at the national convention. I'd love to be on."
Mm-hmm.
So go for it.
Just as a caveat to that you have to have your integrity, and you have to,
Yes.
because once somebody looks you up, like if they see
Yep.
George and they say, "Oh, well, what does he do?" Or he's if I Google George and I see something negative in his background, I'm going to say, "Oh, well, I don't
Right.
think I can go on that
Exactly.
show."
Exactly.
Right.
So that's very important. And for me, like my name and my I don't know, call it my brand, but my reputation as a journalist is everything, I think.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also,
Because if I called Maria Ressa and she didn't know who I was, or I was just somebody on Twitter or somebody doing, I mean, without having, have built what I've built, and having been a investigative reporter, I don't know that she would have said, "Oh yes, I'll be on your show." So there's
yeah.
two things you need. You need to establish yourself as an expert, and you need to be bold and brave, as George said, because you never
Hmm.
know when somebody's going to say yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about social audio. And I'm going to talk about Twitter Spaces specifically because I think that Clubhouse, although it was powerful when it came out, was pretty much the first runner of everything. Didn't have the power of Twitter Spaces in many ways, because with Twitter Spaces, we had a whole platform built into the social audio. So there's a way to interact, like what we're doing right now. Right now in the Nest, we're able to highlight responses from the audience, and how the audience responds, what they speak, what they tweet out, what they DM us can actually change the trajectory of the show and make a real-time impact. You can't do that with a podcast. It was extremely difficult to do that on Clubhouse unless you came up on stage, because
Mm-hmm.
what we can do is we can look at people's tweets. I started out last year. I released a podcast in June called Bold Perspectives, and uh, I liked it, and I had like a lot of downloads in a very short period of time. However, what it lacked was that immediate interactiveness. I mean, once in a while, people would DM me and say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast," but they'd have to go find me on socials in order to do that. But then a lot of time had passed. So, it could be 4 or 5 months later, and they're like, "Man, I really loved your podcast on," and they'd give a title. Well, I don't necessarily remember what I talked about in that session. And so there's not an immediate meeting of the minds that way. It's more of an appreciation. Whereas with social audio and spaces, there's an immediacy, there's an immediate reaction and a connection. And especially when you start telling stories. I'll remember the first time that I ran a Twitter space. I was in a couple Twitter spaces, and then a friend of mine said, "Hey, you can go and ask for early access. At first, you had to have 600 followers, which I didn't have. I activated a dormant account that had, like, I think, no followers. And I thought, well, I'll try it up. So a friend of mine and I said, "Hey, let's try it." We both got early access before the 600 followers. And my first space was fear of failure overcoming. And it was actually a full house right away. My first space, it was insane. Actually, it was April of 2021, and I had just started in March, even just getting on a space. And right away, I don't remember what the story was about, but I was sharing a story, and next thing I know, somebody's tweeting out, "Samantha Postman, you stole our hearts," or something like that. And that immediate response, that the story I was sharing immediately connected with someone, gave that ability to go, "Oh, okay, I'm really connecting," and this ability to, like, connect with them later. So that's something that's really cool. Now, what's even extra cool is, this is someone from another country. Would never have been sitting next to this person in a coffee shop, because obviously we don't live in the same country. What we've done with social audio is taken down all those barriers and walls that we normally see in a social interaction. Clothing doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, culture doesn't matter, um, to the most part. And so what happened is I started going into spaces and speaking to a lot of people. Next thing I know, there was someone from Africa who contacted me during one of my spaces, um, and started talking about the impact that some of the advice that I had given to him. And then I was able to adjust how I spoke in spaces based on the feedback from people. You can't get that in a podcast. You could do a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
100 of them, and not make much of an adjustment, because you're not really getting a lot of feedback other than downloads. And you get some reviews perhaps, but what you get with social audio is this ability to get immediate feedback. And one of the coolest things that I was saying earlier that I got to do is I did this business startup and side hustle Q&A. And it was my opportunity to take my gifts and just offer them to the world for anyone. And here you'd get people from countries all over the world that didn't have access to business advice or free, and some of them were in very remote areas that have Wi-Fi at least. Sometimes they'd go to coffee shop for Wi-Fi's, and they were able to ask for unique, tailored advice. "Hey, I've got this situation. I'm starting this business up. I'm stuck here." And then able to give advice right there on the spot, or ask more questions, or give direction, whatever was needed. Sometimes it was even just encouragement. Honestly, you're on the right path. Here's some ways that you can just, adjust your journey just slightly, and then you're off sailing to the sailing to the big money. And so that was a really cool experience, and very satisfying on many levels that you don't get in a podcast or a radio show, because of the immediate response and ability to do tailored advice. And before I
Mm.
close off, one of the coolest things I got to do was, someone from Africa reached out to me and said that he loved how I interacted with mental wellness. And I started working with him. He was Philip Agola, and actually he's one of 16 or 17 in the world that was brought in for a pilot project with the United Nations Foundation. And so I got to work with him in a movement for the continent of Africa. And I know it's a big country. It's not one country, it's many countries, but he was brought in for the continent of all things and bringing mental wellness. And I was able to work with him quite a bit to help people, especially during COVID. And what was cool about this was that people from all over the world were able to come on and get support, get emotional support, talk about mental wellness, as well as get tips and tools to help them in their moment. Normally, like here, if you, I don't know what it would cost there, but here it's like $150 an hour to go in for counseling. So they were able to, it wasn't necessarily counseling, but it was an ability, I guess there was elements of counseling. There's an ability for them to be heard, to be helped and put on the right path. So not only were we able to help people with their businesses, we were able to help with their mental wellness at the same time. Where else can you just go and get that variety and that diversity while meeting people with long-term relationships? Him and I still talk on a regular basis. And then also everyone in this room, same thing. We kind of came up together. Social audio was all new to us. We got on spaces, helped each other out. Like how many Twitter Spaces 101s did we run that first like 6 months, right?
Oh, wow. Yep.
Like, oh my gosh, I swear that was like once a week. And we were all helping each other out, mastering the medium. Anyone who came in, it was really a spirit of
Mm-hmm.
helping each other improve and become experts together. And here we are from my very first Twitter space that I ran 18 months ago to being in a space where we're coming together and taking what we've learned and helping other people jump off of that. Or how a lot of time, a lot of in mentorship, we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. So, we've done that growing for you, and everyone in this space can come into our spaces and get on our shoulders and just jump straight off and jump for the,
Mm-hmm.
like shoot for the stars, get, get on that rocket and get to the moon from there. So I really appreciate this journey. I appreciate the immediacy of being able to help people on the spot and the ability to connect with people through
Hmm.
social.
What a great share, Samantha.
Yeah.
I mean, some days I just want to like step inside your brain and see the world like you do, because it's just electrifying all the ways that you look at life, and you're so much knowledge you pack in. It's just so nice. We have a great panel here, and I just want to go back to what I was saying earlier about this social audio being sort of the version of Gutenberg, basically the Gutenberg press, and how it impacted the future is how I see social audio and putting basically the power of this in your pocket. As I get wiser, the more I realize that things a lot of times work with both ends of the perspective. Whereas, like I said last week and got a few giggles about I'm a genius and I'm an idiot, right? When both things can be true, now you start to understand that, yes, this is groundbreaking and everything, but it's also very ordinary. The idea that what George was talking about was very fascinating, that 54 years ago he was doing this with telephones. I was an amateur radio operator and a CB enthusiast back when I was in
Hmm.
high school, and all of this stuff was going on. If you go back
Yep.
to like AOL and Prodigy, there was chat rooms in there. So that part is like very ordinary. But there's a part of this that is just exceptional, and there's parts of this that makes it like really sort of says that the universe that we belong to is ready for what we have, the tools that we have at our disposal. And I think that the components, as I break it down, is that whenever we can have these chat rooms basically that have purpose, like where you can tag and sort of have a purpose, a title, that kind of thing, it brings people together to talk specifically about something. And that is, having an intention is like what brings life to bear in anything, like any life form. Anything that has a purpose can rise. So it's very important that we understand first and foremost that there's a purpose to the room. The second thing is the fact that we have global reach. The reach that we had with CB radio would be your neighborhood, and what's the chances you're actually going to have somebody that wants to talk about these topics right there in your neighborhood or within the reach of your antenna? It has all changed now. The reach is global. It's basically where your voice will take it. The next thing is that we have the multimedia connection. We didn't have that with these other things. Now we can pull in
Right.
all kinds of supporting material and assets and links in the nest and things like that. We have so many ways to augment and add to our audio if we choose to do so. Um, um, the Wisdom, where I spend so much time with, has just launched a really cool thing called Ask Me Anything, and you can answer the question in 60 seconds, and now it becomes an audiogram that you can share out to social media. Now we're taking basically Google Shorts, or YouTube Shorts, and bringing it to social audio. So there's some really groundbreaking things with social audio, and I think we're going to see a big, big difference. I have a couple
Yeah.
more things, and then I'll wrap. The fact that following, these platforms can boost your following. I'm a nobody on Twitter Spaces, but I'm a somebody on Wisdom, and Wisdom is just a social audio platform. It's not a tweeting. It's not all of the things that Twitter is and all of these other places is. So every single person I've earned as a follower on Wisdom is directly related to the content. It's directly related to what I've said. And when I light up a talk on Wisdom, it notifies 6,000 people, right? I've earned that. When I was on CB radio and I jump on channel 18, it didn't notify 6,000 people that I just jumped on. So the benefit of the following is a major, major thing that we didn't used to have back when George had his phone conference center. And then
Right.
finally is the ancillary benefit, the benefit that we get, like our offline reputation, the fact that social audio gives people a way to peer into who we are as a human, as a professional. And we start to say, do we want to do business with this person? Do we know this person? And do we feel like we want to be a part of what they stand for? And so it's sort of the hub in which we start to really curate the people we want to do business with. And so I will leave it there, but I just want to say it is revolutionary. It is the Gutenberg for our hearts and our minds and our voices, but it's also very ordinary at the same time.
Mm.
And
Wonderful.
that's where the magic is. That's why it's revolutionized everything we're doing right now, and how we connect, and how we listen to each other, and how we grow too. And it's just amazing watching this transformational journey that we all went through in the span of what, 2 years now, almost 2 years, a year. I just met all of you a year ago, and we met in spaces. And when it comes to my journey with social audio, I'm a human rights activist, and I believe that, I know it's not mentioned yet, but I'm fighting for this cause, and I'm very passionate about this cause, is that technology and information access is a human right. So for years I've been fighting for this cause. I am an African and I married an American, and I'm a digital nomad. So right now my host country is in Malaysia. So I travel the world. And I was born in the Middle East, and I traveled to Europe, and I traveled to a lot of different countries. And when I was in Africa, I was doing my research on cancer. And every single time I tried to research something online, I was blocked. My IP address was blocked. And I would get this pop-up message that I will never forget, and it says your IP address has been restricted because of whatever. And it's because of the country I was in was sanctioned by another country because of that. So, and because of that, I couldn't have access to technology. And that was way back when I was 19 and 20 years old. So I've had this passion that I want to provide access to technology and information to everyone. So, to fast track this, I've tried so many different ways, and then social audio came, and I just joined, and that spark was kind of, it wasn't dead, it was there, but I wasn't giving up, but I almost did, because I just couldn't provide access and technology to everyone I knew. I mean, I'm just one person. And then social audio came, and I was in the rooms, and I was listening, and I was seeing people from all over the world, and that spark, I felt it. Like the warmth in my body, that chill in my spine, and it connected. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is how I'm going to be able to do this. So, because social audio was new to me and was new to the entire world, so I didn't know anything about it. That was in 2021, or how to amplify its power and harness this power that's in it. Excuse me. To harness this power in it, then I started to look around for spaces and rooms. How do I do this? What are other people doing? So then I couldn't find what I was looking for. And then I just decided, you know what? If I can't find it, I'm just going to create it myself. So I just jumped in and I started bringing in people from different industries. I've had scientists, I've had podcast experts, journalists, coaches, psychologists, which are all here with me today. Jason, Bunsen and Beaker account, Jennifer, George, Samantha, Rose, Daryl, and so many other people. And I just brought them and I just created this show and I called it Twitter Spaces Decoded. And I bring in these people and I ask them, what is social audio? How did you grow your account? How did you grow your social audio? How are you using it for this specific industry? And each and every single one of them, it was the same questions that I structured for all of the guests, but every single guest I had on the show had a completely different answer and perspectives on how they use social audio. So one of the things that I realized, like every time I go back and listen to the podcast, not a single episode was repeated the same thing, not a single one. So it was really, it was just amazing to watch how this kept unfolding. And I thought, after 2 seasons of the show, I thought, okay, so now everyone now understands social audio. And boy, was I wrong. So I came back again in 2022 and I started the show again and season 3, and I started the show again. I was like, okay, I'm going to shift this again. And I started going to spaces again, and I still find people looking for information, trying to understand how to use social audio. And then when I found the power of social audio and the potential, I kept telling everyone about it because I was so passionate and excited about it. And then I kept telling my clients. I run an agency called the Social Ikigai, and I do funnels for clients and I help them with their advertising, just a basic, what a marketing agency and advertising agency does. And I kept telling them about social audio. But even my clients, I've had coaches who get paid $7,000 an hour. Okay. And they have spoken, they are on Forbes, they have spoken in major stages, and they had no idea how to use social audio in their business. And I was like, this is it. This is where I have to be that connection between the people and the resources that are available to us, and be that catalyst to connect people with the resources. And this is what my spaces were about. And I'm very passionate about it. Someone actually asked me to monetize my podcast. And I said, no, because this is for access for information and technology, and this is a human right, and everyone deserves the right to have access to technology and information, especially information, because I come from the background where I know it's embedded in me that knowledge is power, and we can only elevate the people around us and our societies and our cultures and our communities through that power, through knowledge. So I will continue doing that through social audio. So this is how I perceive the power of social audio when it comes to me. So now I have 2 shows, the Twitter Spaces Decoded, which is decoding social audio, how to use it for different industries, how to use it in your life, how to grow your brand as an individual, how to connect with people. Just like the stories I mentioned about earlier, those are real people with depression, real business owners who just couldn't do it and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. So when I have this really powerful tool in my hands and I can help someone with it, you bet I will. So just like Samantha mentioned, we used to jump in spaces every single day. I don't know how we did that, guys. Like 5 hours?
Right.
We went for 5 hours? Oh my
Yep. Yep.
God.
Gia, you raise an interesting issue here that it, and we should mention it, if not warn people, it can be too powerful. And let me give you an example of that. In February, every day at 12 o'clock, I ran for a month. I ran mind skills coaching. I ran coaching sessions on better thinking, basically. And it got very deep very fast. Now, I've got a lot of training in doing psychotherapy, but I don't want to do that on Twitter. I don't think it's appropriate to do psychotherapy in public. So I didn't want to get as deep as it got very quickly. And I didn't have the skills to not, how do you keep it from getting deep? Because all my training was in how to get it deep. So I never even thought about how do you keep it on a lighter level. So I worked with my wife, who's a prominent psychotherapist. and some other people, and now I'm ready to do it again. And I think I know how to do it on the coaching and counseling level rather than the therapy level. But it can get people feel very safe on an audio medium, and especially when they hear, that I'm welcoming and that I'm affirming and that I'm validating and all that, they want to just open up about their traumas and all kinds of stuff that is just not appropriate. So you have to really be careful. It can be too powerful.
That's
I
true.
have a Yeah, I have a new word that I use on wisdom. I call it human workshopping,
Oh,
where
Mm,
we're,
that is so
collectively,
cool.
yeah, we're
yeah.
elbow to elbow, just trying to lift each other up as co-mentors, not necessarily as professionals. But I understand when you do have legal credential or, professional certifications like lawyers and doctors and therapists, there's certain things you can't say. So just as a plain old schmuck like me, we can just kind of help each other.
Yeah, but my degrees and licenses are in the drawer somewhere. I don't even know where they are, and I never renewed them because I became a business consultant that didn't need the credentials. So I don't have the credentials technically. So it's I don't want it to get deep and don't want to talk about. There are a huge number, particularly on Clubhouse, a huge number of support groups, and they're wonderful and they are important to people. They're life changing to people. I just don't want to be the one running them.
Mm.
That's not my field.
Yeah, I want
Well,
to add
that
to
could be another. Oh, just one thing. There could be legal ramifications too.
Of course,
Just
right, exactly.
yeah, and
Yes.
that's the thing we also may see in the near future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Actually, yeah, because one of the things when I was running the podcast, when I was recording, then I realized, what if someone doesn't want their name there or their voice there or something? So I started having this little snippet that I say before I start the space, that I say, this will be recorded. So if you don't want your name there or your voice there, please let me know, because this is going to go on a podcast, on a YouTube. So yeah, you're right, Daryl. There might be some legal procedures or SOPs
I
for that.
Yeah, I went and had a lawyer write me one,
Oh,
a
that's a good
short
one.
one, and I've been using for decades. But I don't know if it's still valid or not. But I'll still use it. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, you're saying that by participating, by the act of participating, you are giving blanket permission to use basically in any way I want, in whole or in part. I can't remember the exact wording, but I
Mm,
have it here all the time.
that's a good
But
step.
so that's a very good point. You really need to make sure that people know the ground rules and they're giving permission
Mm-hmm.
and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
I
important
hope we're
to
not scaring anybody, because quite the
no,
opposite. We
I
want
think
to encourage people to get in here and try it. Go ahead, Samantha. Sorry.
no, I think it is important to just touch on this because this is something that Gia talks a lot about. We like talk about the rose, we look through things through the rose colored glasses and forget to remind people that there's a human element that we need to just be really aware of. And that's something that I've had to master over the 18 months. That people will use spaces as a place for counseling. No, I don't, it's not isn't intentional always, but especially in the early days when COVID was happening, the same people would go from space to space to space and share their struggles, and then sometimes go into a DM. I mean, I literally was doing suicide prevention in my DM sometimes
Yep.
because of the intimacy that happens in social audio. So that intimacy that can be so powerful um, can sometimes make of what can happen with social audio, but you do have to be aware that those can happen, and then reach out to people. Like for us, we have a group of us, and so we can ask each other something that we need to do. So I just want to put that out there, that
Hmm.
there is the power goes both ways. There is, and also too, it's just social audio. We know that social audio scrubbing is coming down the line, where you can, like, now you can type in a person's name in Google. Eventually you'll be able to just to put in a little clip of someone's voice and be able to search anything they've ever said online. And so there's
Oh,
that could be good and bad, but I'm just as hosts, we need to be responsible. And so as hosts, we need to be responsible. And so for any of you are here, being successful, success means there's
We used to record, remember? We used to look for tools to record different spaces. For tools to record different spaces.
Yep.
Yes,
On
and
that
no
also,
one knew about it.
But I always
Mhm.
put record in the top, even if I wasn't to
Mhm.
really dwell with people. And
Mhm.
also, the other thing that I want to just mention before we move on is this ability to grow yourself. The self-development that's capable in a Twitter space or any social audio, because of that immediate feedback, because of that immediate DMs that come, is so powerful. I think
Mm.
that social audio might be one of the fastest ways to self-development if you let it.
I agree
Yes.
100%. And I think that obviously the time investment is one thing, but the willingness to be authentic and somewhat vulnerable is the way to actually get to those stratospheric levels of growth in a very short period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it accelerates for me. I see it as a tool that accelerates it cuts down all the things you need to do to grow your brand, to grow your skills, to grow your public You can get booked as a public speaker just from people coming and listening to your spaces. Like I've seen that. So it's
Oh,
much,
yeah.
much
Oh yeah, actually,
faster
that's
now.
kind of what happened to me, Gia, because when I was speaking, somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think that we could have you could do a TED Talk,"
See?
and then wanted to coach me actually. And
See?
I hadn't even thought about it before that. And then I was like, man, he like literally gave me the whole playbook of how he was going to help me land a TED Talk. And then I was like, well, darn, I can do that. So I just started it. And next thing I know, like within 6 months of being on social audio, I had booked a TED Talk. So yeah, I mean, it got canceled
Wow.
because of COVID, but still within 6 months.
That's amazing. And that reminds me, actually, we all heard each other. The reason why we came here together as the conversationalists is because we all heard each other. We all connected through social audio. We all know how to speak. Like we can run this group, all of us, we can just run any space. And we did that. We can just go ahead, run any space on the spot because we're used to each other's styles. And to bring that up, I want to bring in Jason because he is the one who actually started the Conversationalist, the Bunsen and Beaker account right here, those two cute dogs. Jason, tell us the story. I'm going to leave that to you.
Hi, because of other commitments, I didn't know if I'd be able to come today. Thank you, Gia. And I've been just loving the conversation, and that is the heart. That is the absolute heart of why I asked a bunch of panel of speakers to come together with this team. I heard all of you in different spaces, and everything you've said so far is the truth. I've grown as a person. I've learned from all of you by hopping into different spaces. Um, I've educated myself from the tidbits everybody's thrown out there. And I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if all of these people that I respect for their different perspectives and their different expertise came together to talk about a thing? Because it would be such a good conversation. We would all not agree. We would all be polite to each other because we have those skills with talking. And it would be really fun for the listeners to hear all of these different perspectives and bring our different audiences together. We have a very specific audience that listens to us. And if I can, is there time, Gia, just for me to quickly talk about my audio stuff? I don't know if there's time.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Of course
sure.
you
Okay.
do.
Yeah,
Of
please.
course,
Yeah.
come on.
Are you kidding?
I
Yeah, but I
know.
wasn't.
Come
Go
I
on.
ahead.
know I wasn't on
Yeah.
I wasn't on the panel. I just kind of got here by
No,
accident.
it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, real quick. So, like, our account is enormous, right? We have this huge pet account that tries to teach science through the eyes of a dog. It is an account that promotes kindness and empathy. It's like a feel good, fuzzy place on Twitter. And when Spaces came up, I was like, I don't know if that's right for our account because I was the Jim Henson puppet master behind the scenes running the voices of these dogs. And unless people listen to my podcast, they didn't know anything about our family, right? So I started a space where we just talked about the antics of Bunsen and Beaker. And it was really popular. That became our pet chat space. And this community grew from this space. And it's everything you all said. People talk about their wins with their pets, and they talk about their pet loss, which is something that people may have to go through alone, but they don't need to go through it alone when you're part of a community. Just the stories and the games that we play in Pet Chat. And now I'm bringing in fairly famous pet owners to talk about their pets, which is really weird. But it just increases that community. And then the other audio show I was like, one of the most fun things I have when I run my science podcast is interviewing these different scientists from all over the world. And sometimes it's just the random conversations I have with them, like talking to an astrophysicist about Star Wars. I'm like, what do you think about Star Wars? And I was like, what would be really funny and really interesting and really good for science communication is if they were talking to an audience live. And that's where our science chat started on Tuesday, the humanization of these amazing scientists that have, some of them have really small Twitter accounts. Some of them don't have a big public presence. And our huge account can augment their voice to hundreds and hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people in the replays, talking about what they study, from X-ray crystallography, nuclear science, squids. And that excitement that they bring, it's in their voice. It's the connection to their voice. And that connection and that passion makes everybody just as excited about whatever they're talking about, even if it's something you started your day you'd never ever think you'd listen to. And that goes back to how powerful Spaces is, how powerful social audio is that I never thought I'd meet any of you. Right? You all have different expertise, from journalism to marketing to public speaking to mind skills to Jennifer still is trying to explain blockchain to me. I don't know. I still don't get it. But but anyways, and Daryll brings in this wonderful, like, metaphysical, global, empathetic, spiritual side, which I love. And I never would have met any of you, plus the other dozens of people, if there wasn't for Twitter Spaces. So thank you for all coming together as the conversationalists.
And those of you who are listening, just replay the last minute or two and listen to Jason's voice. He is one of the most expressive people on all of Spaces. His voice, you can tell his genuineness, his honesty, his integrity in his voice. And it's a real lesson in how people come across. I don't think I ever said that to you directly, Jason, but it's absolutely true. And you guys can just replay it and listen to it.
Thanks, George. I'm blushing.
Um,
There's no blushing emoji.
George, if you ever need a dog sitter, I'm there for you, Jason.
And just like I mentioned earlier, in the introduction, this is home, and nothing is gonna wreck this. This is exactly home. This is our home. Social audio, us together, listening to each other. Like, especially last week's episode, like we were really emotional about a lot of deep things that we shared together, and we just felt safe with each other, and we shared those things, and we knew we had each other's backs. And this is just because of social audio, just because we started here in a random space on a random Tuesday on Twitter. And this is why I love it. This is why I love it here. So now we're going to our lightning round. And oh yes, I pinned in the nest. I pinned the story behind how we started. It's a little funny video. So this is how we just literally started. It takes you through the journey of social audio, how we started, and how we ended here today. And now quickly for the speakers, lightning round. Okay, we're going to open the stage soon. Thank you for those who are requesting the mic. Please keep your requests so I can immediately pull you up as soon as we open the stage. First come, first serve. And now I want you to tell me, what are creative ways that people can use Twitter Spaces? Go.
focus groups, um, coaching sessions,
Mm-hmm.
Tutoring.
tutoring. Yeah.
We use
It's-
Kahoot on our pet chat, which is a interactive, fun game. It is hilarious. I would suggest you think about playing a game in your spaces.
I did that before. My kids did that with you too in a space, I remember, in a pet chat, and they had so much fun. So it was even kid friendly.
I would say education and knowledge sharing. And it's knowledge sharing that doesn't just go one way, because I may have a piece of knowledge that I want to share, but the people in the space will add their own knowledge. And so this whole ability for us to learn together, to share what we've learned and to grow together is very powerful.
So classes and workshops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
I
think
saw.
building
Yeah.
Go ahead, Samantha.
confidence, especially when I'm going back to public speaking, because public speaking is very hard to do, especially when you're in a bit large group and you have to be able to get them all in one room. It's actually quite encompassing. However, on a Twitter space, you literally can just, it doesn't matter what you're wearing, what you're doing, you literally just pop it open and get going. And the more often you do it, the easier it becomes. And I actually did a public speaking event a couple months ago, and the slideshow didn't work. And it was on photography of all things. So you definitely need a slideshow for photography, but it wasn't working. I did a 1 hour keynote speech without any notes and without any slideshow, 1 hour straight through with no notes, no nothing, because I had spoken on social audio for a year and I literally just stitched the stories together, or the ways that I spoke, because of speaking on social audio. They were
Mhm.
just like blown away that I could do that without reading any notes.
Wow. Wow. For me, it was a funeral. One time I saw an actual funeral space. I didn't go in, but that was a very interesting thing. And I noted it down, and I was like, wow, funerals. Yes, for spaces, sure, why not? And the other day I was in a space with a professor from a university. I forgot the name of the university, and he put the space live for his students in the classroom, and some of the students joined, and then he brought it was about social media. I think it was a marketing class for the students, and he brought us up. It was me, Rachel from another amazing speaker, and he brought us up to teach the students too. That was such a
Wow.
fascinating experience. I told him on the spot, I'm like, listen, if I had this growing up as a student, it would have shifted my entire education experience.
Yep.
I wouldn't have ditched classes for once.
I'm thinking about doing that with my high school students, actually, Gia. I was in that space. That was a really good idea.
Yeah, you were there too. Yeah, I remember. It was such a good experience. It was so fun. One of the things that I'm doing right now, I'm experimenting. I'm using my spaces as a knowledge harvest. So I bring this topic, and I start with a very controversial title, and I bring in the problem to the speakers, and then they come up, and then we explore this topic, the positives, the negatives, its impact on us, etc. So we did social media threats and benefits, which one outweighs the other. And honestly, that is such an enriching experience. I look forward to these weekly sessions every single week, and it's such like it's global perspectives. I'm hearing about education, for example, from Africa, from Europe, from America, from Asia. So, and I bring all of this discussion together and record it in a podcast, and then I'm going to write articles about it. So this is a really, really good experience. That it's an experiment, but it's working out so well so far.
I have another use cases, George. That is customer seminars.
Ooh.
And I used to use bring together focus groups of 1 or 2 users, enthusiastic users of a group, and 8 or 10 skeptics. And the enthusiastic users would invariably turn around the skeptics. So user groups, boy, if I were still in the business, I'd be doing Tesla groups all over the place. So it could be services, it can be products, it can be anything. But user groups of all kinds, that's $1 million idea.
Dang. Wow. I never thought about that before. That's good.
Mhm.
Anyone else with any creative idea for spaces?
Yeah, I'll mention 2 things that I was thinking. One that I've been mulling over, but hearing everybody here makes it brings it more into focus, and that is, I love to write poetry, and I've popped in on first on Clubhouse and then in Twitter Spaces on poetry rooms, and some of them are led by fantastic people like Bach Muse and Lovely Lions, and people come in and read their poems. And then I've had these conversations offline, like a woman who, heard me maybe talk about being Jewish, and she's from a Middle Eastern country, and she said, how could we have met? There was someone from Asia, someone from the Middle East, and myself from New York City. And one thing I could do is like make it a workshop, and because I love prompts, and I've taught workshops, and I like to use prompts, and you could conceivably, like, I could read 2 or 3 poems as a prompt,
Mhm.
give a prompt, and then people could comment, like you would in a workshop. You go around, and so you have 5 or 10 minutes to write, and then you come together, and people in this chat, we have 17 comments at the moment, could be saying, a line they noticed, or, not necessarily, I hate it when it's somebody saying a poem is good or bad, but note what they notice in the poem, and that helps to inform the poet what resonates with people. So this, could be a classroom for people who, have a passion for poetry, or, and that can be extended to many other subjects. But how else would I meet poets who could be in Africa, the Middle East, South America, except through this
Mhm.
social audio space?
And notice what
Usually when I
go ahead,
went to
sorry.
poetry workshops, it was local. So, I mean, I'd go in Manhattan usually, and, so people were from different parts of the country, but it certainly wasn't as diverse as you could find in Twitter spaces.
Notice
That's
what
really
Rose
good.
is doing. Rose is speculating about possible ways to use it. And I really urge people to do that. Almost anything you could imagine doing. People call me up all the time and DM me all the time about, could I do this in a space? Could I do this in a space? The answer is always yes, because you can find a way to do it. So
I,
stay creative like Rose.
Yeah, I just want to say I operate a co-working space. It's one of my businesses, and people like the idea of working alongside other people. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of potential to have virtual co-working or virtual studying spaces where people are co-studying, co-working. I even heard somebody do a thing on Wisdom the other day. Is be with me while I clean a house. What is it? ASMR.
Wild.
And just like listen to me as I clean a house, and then just talk to me if you want to. Well, I mean, you could have a space of just people that want to clean up their house together. Really, it's about, that purpose. Like I said, if you can find a purpose, you can find a people, because the global connection that these platforms have will find those people. Just be the beacon,
Right.
be the purpose, and they will come.
Beautiful.
Okay, that's my favorite saying of the entire space. If you can find a purpose, you can find a people.
Yep.
No, this should
Yeah,
be
that's awesome.
the title. We should just change the whole title. But exactly this, the purpose.
That
This is
was
the
exact.
purpose. That's the power.
Hmm.
That's the power. All right, guys. For our
Should we open it
speakers,
up?
yes, we're going to open it up. And while I bring the people up who are requesting the mic, for our amazing speakers today, your tips and final remarks for anyone who would like to start space.
I will say, this is Jennifer. My tip is to just get started. It's scary, it's intimidating. You're going to open up your first space and you will be the only person in that space. And you're going to feel like, why do I have anything to add value? Because you can record, think of turning this into something that you can share afterwards. It doesn't have to be that 10, 20, 50 people show up live. It's being recorded. So speak your mission and your message and then share it afterwards. And number one,
Hmm.
that'll help you get stronger and get more confident. Number two, it'll slowly build your audience. I would say be consistent. Gia's talked about, and Jason talked about scheduling their shows on Tuesdays and on Saturdays. I have mine on Wednesdays and Fridays. Wherever we're doing our shows, we're pretty consistent with it. So be consistent. And then if you've never gotten up on stage before, start as a guest and gain your confidence and make it happen.
Hmm.
I think ask someone to do your first space with you. That's what I did. There's 2 of us together, because as long as you have one other person beside you, then you're golden. So just invite one person to jump into start a space with you. What we used to do is put at the top, test space or my first space, because you can change the title anytime you want during this space. And as soon as you do that, you'll have a whole bunch of seasoned people just jump right in and start helping you out. It's really beautiful to be a part of that kind of community. So put it right in the top and get going. The other thing that I'd like to really recommend is that when you find a space or a speaker or a host that you really resonate well with and you really connect well, then start hanging out in their spaces and making notes, like what's working for them, what's not, because it will help you to jumpstart and accelerate your hosting if you have someone to model about what's working and why it's connecting well with you. And my last piece of advice is just remember that it's a combined experience. So your goal is to make sure that the listeners in the audience has a really good experience, that your speakers have a good experience, and that you have a lot of fun along the way.
Thank you, Samantha. As always, great contributions. I'm just going to say my tip is to be as real and as authentic and genuine as you can possibly be, and really focus today more than ever on the pull versus the push. Allow the fact that the actual feeling of the end user is what should be pulling through you your best potential of what you have to say. So if you're all about the end user, if you're all about the listener and how what you say makes them feel, or how what you do fills them up, then the rest just takes care of itself if you come from a genuine place.
Mhm.
Great, great, Daryl. You dropped a lot of pearls today. I will just say that before you begin a space, approach it as you would any other, thing you're going to try. Have a plan. Why you're doing this. Have a mission, and have a plan of action. So get somebody who's been in spaces as a co-host to co-host with you, and ask a few of your friends to join you. So you have a few people in the space. I've seen people start a space and there's one other person. This is maybe in the early days, and that's sort of uh, it doesn't build confidence if that happens. So have a mission, know why you're doing it, and a way to do it. Would be my tips for today. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for your
Yeah.
amazing tips. And Rose, we have our next show, and you'll be hosting for the Conversationalists, our next episode. Would you tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that?
Yes. So far the tentative title is The Interview, Ask Us Anything. I feel like, we get to people's questions, but I'd love to hear what people from all our platforms that we're on want to ask us, and we can curate that. But I would start out with possibly thinking of a lightning round with some really fun questions to ask our speakers, and then maybe model how we, when many of us, host shows with guests, model how we do that, and
Terrific.
pose our questions, and then open it up to everyone to ask us anything. And maybe we would people would be able to put their questions in the chat. We'll figure out a way to do that so we can see what's people are asking on all the platforms. I thought that as our ninth show and as a way to bring more people and hear what they want to ask us and what they want, that would be a great way to do it. So I'm really excited about it.
Great
It'll be
idea. Wow. Fantastic.
October 22nd. We're going to be off for a week, take a break, and then it'll start season 3.
Dynamite.
And we have discussed a lot of really good topics too. I mean, we discussed movies, we discussed AI. I'm going to post it to the Nest. We record these shows in all, and they're available in all the major podcast distributors. So take a look at them. Check if you have a suggestions for us too. If you'd like us to discuss a topic, let us know. All of these speakers here, their DMs are open, so just let us know. And hopefully you'll be there too for our next show. So the reason why we're taking a break too is so that we can strategize to make sure that we're providing the best experience for our audience, and also to prepare for all of this mega podcast, because no one has done this before. We're podcast, we're live in all of those channels. We're live in Clubhouse, LinkedIn, YouTube streaming, Wisdom. So it takes a lot of work and production and preparation to provide the best experience for everyone here. And so you can learn too from these topics. So this is another user case actually for Spaces. We didn't think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
This exact show.
Exactly. One quick tip that I didn't get to say, I put it in the nest. My usual plea for interactive mode. It's not for everybody, and it's not for every space, not for every purpose, but we did this in pretty much interactive mode where we were reacting to each other's comments. I urge you to try that. There's an article in the nest telling you exactly what's the thinking behind it and how to do it.
And that's one of my favorite modes as well. So make sure you check all the resources in the nest as well.
And if you miss them, they're in Spaces dashboard. Spaces dashboard captures everything that's in the nest. So spacesdashboard.com will get you the recording of this and everything else.
Yes, isn't technology amazing?
Yep.
So with that, we open the stage. We have Billy Dees and AC Hart with us. AC Hart, thank you so much. I appreciate you've been here waiting patiently.
She's been waiting the whole
time.
time. Yeah.
I know. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and welcome to the space, Billy, as well. Go ahead, AC.
Thank you very much. The first time I saw George in a space, I thought that's what I want to be when I grow up. So, when I saw him here, I had just rolled out of bed because it's a Saturday, and I'm like, no, I'm doing that. And I'm totally on fire now. I have pretty much zero web presence. I skipped the Web 2 revolution because I was busy studying how sound waves move through the organ and tissue systems of the body and how actual connection, empathy, and rapport takes place. And so I ran a Twitter space on George's advice yesterday. It went great. My first one, and now I'm thinking I want to run one every single day. Now, here's the challenge I'm running into, and I'm so excited to have access to your minds, because what I have discovered in my work is a way to use the sound of the human voice to basically echolocate where people are storing embedded limitation trauma in the actual tissue of their bodies, which then is fired and wired into the neural pathways of their brain. And then more importantly, how to use the sound of their own voice to release those limitations out of the mind and body. But if I'm going to be doing this on Twitter Spaces, how do I keep it from, because people are literally using their voices to bring up trauma. How do I keep it from becoming, a therapy session where people are breaking down? Because I had that happen with a lot of my students in the past. During the sessions, they basically fall apart. So now what? How do I make it appropriate?
I'll jump
Wow.
in.
That's
I guess, make that a ground rule as you start a space, or as you put out the news about the everyday space that you're going to do, that you want to keep it more of an intellectual exercise of how these sound waves affect us than for people to get into a personal story. Because I can certainly see it, because it is very abstract. So, it's hard for me to even imagine how this space would work unless you're somehow demonstrating what it is you're talking about. Because otherwise people
yes.
would jump in and say, well, I've had this incident, and when I speak about it, some of that pain, if that's what you're saying, dissipates, which is the idea of therapy, partly, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure what the
You
answer is.
see, AC, I got an idea for you. If you want to take a page out of the wisdom book, I'd love to see you on wisdom, obviously, because that's my space. But um, I would just be up there with just one guest or one speaker at a time, and just let the audience pick up from you all that you have to talk about with that one guest, and make sure that the guest or speaker, in that case, knows the ground rules and everything like that, so that you can actually sort of demonstrate this concept, and also have it in a controlled way, and now you can then reach the people, and then if they're interested, you can link them through the nest or through whatever your links are, to find out more and all of that kind of thing. But I am really excited to hear about what you have to say, because
Yeah.
I could talk to
Mm-hmm.
you for hours.
AC's got a lot of really
Well,
great stuff. And, I would advise you, AC, to just, as Rose said, lay out the ground rules. Say, often when you go through the voice doing these exercises, we get to some childhood traumas, and we can identify them, but we can't handle them here. This is not the place to handle them here. You got to go find a mental health professional of one kind or another, counseling, coaching, therapy, whatever. Um, but you need to handle that outside of the session. So basically, the magic phrase is, that's not what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, I do.
yeah,
So I do understand that. And here's the thing is like this technology that I've developed, that uses really just your voice, it actually is, in my opinion, the fastest way to
to get to,
deprogram
yeah.
those
Mm-hmm.
limitations. And if I send somebody to like therapy where they're just talking about it, then they're firing and wiring those neural pathways
Well, you can do
further.
getting it a little more deeply than I'm comfortable with here, etc. So you can regulate it. By
Can
the
I just jump
way,
in?
just let me. Thank you. AC is the person who I jumped on in Mariah's session. I jumped on her clumsily. She was going on a little bit, and I handled it very badly. And I said too many details or something like that. I had lost patience because of something else that was going on, and she was the recipient of it. So I DM'd her and I apologized, and we got into a conversation. We then later on had 2 more phone conversations, and we've become friends. And so that's the kind of thing that can happen on Spaces. I
Mm-hmm.
acted very offensively. I apologized for it. She saw that my apology was genuine. I did feel terrible about what I did, and there was a whole basis of a lot of sharing that we did, and that's what can go on in Spaces if you're open, honest, and authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
George,
And
that's hilarious because there was no one else I wanted to talk to from that space but you. I was like, ooh, this one's alive. I'm really interested to see, what did I do that was, disruptive for him, because that actually helps me become better at what I do. And I
mm-hmm.
have a new rule, which is that you're never allowed to apologize for that again because you are my hero.
Okay,
New rule.
thank you.
I won't talk to
Oh,
you ever again if you apologize for that.
but see, look at her attitude. See, her attitude was, I want to learn. I don't
Yes.
want to be defensive about it. So when I saw that she wanted to learn, then I answered her DM. And we went on a back and forth because we both wanted to learn from that experience that we had
Mm-hmm.
had that was not satisfactory at the time. And we both learned a lot from it. And we are now, I think, we could really call us each other
Mm-hmm.
friends.
Yes,
And that's
gratitude is
how
advanced forgiveness. Okay,
it
Yeah,
good.
that's
is.
right.
It is. And this is another tip for anyone listening here today. This is another tip. Just reach out, be willing to learn, unlearn everything you know when it comes to Spaces. If you want to really learn how to run Spaces professionally, unlearn everything that you have learned, because this is a whole different medium. And when it comes to audio medium, there's no one better than Billy Dees to speak about that. Thank you so much,
Yep.
Billy.
Hey, Billy.
Oh, before
Hey,
we go,
can I please respond to
oh,
AC?
yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Because I actually dealt with this when I was working with reshaping conversations in Africa. So you can imagine in Africa, there's a lot of diverse trauma that's happened over the ages. And so this is exactly what we worked with. And so I have experience in this. So here's so here's how we handled it in those spaces. I don't know that I like to use the word rules very much, but I would say, for this, what I would do is start off the space a little bit talking about how when we share our past traumas, often it can trigger off PTSD in others. And so, in order to make sure that this is a safe space that we can be in healing, that it's important to refer to our pain and not relive our pain. And I also would sometimes talk about that when we relive our pain and talk about it as the present, it actually re-embeds as if it just happened, because our brains can't always decipher whether something happened in the past or the present when you're reliving it. So, in order to make sure that there's a place of healing and for everyone, refer to the past, and that's basically how we handle it. So refer to your past, not relive your past. and explained why it's important to do that. And we had barely anyone relive their entire past that way. And especially when we explained that it could trigger off people's PTSD, and then people were really, really careful with that. And so I feel like the spaces went really, really well that way.
Samantha, that's brilliant. Thank you. I really
Yes.
feel like that's going to be the key. You know, I don't approach this as therapy. I approach it as facilitation. It's like, how do we make it easier for you to get your voice out? You know, and if you have a wall of tension in your body, you can't push the sound wave through that. You know, we need to get those walls of tension, but it does require people, you know, go deep inside and face some of the demons that they've literally buried and tuned out to for a reason. You know,
Mm.
but I'd like to, you know, what I'm trying to do with the Twitter space is to get a lot of people interested in this work so that I can find my real community, and maybe have like a more controlled class situation, you know, where I do that with the people who are like deeply interested in it. So thank you for letting me speak. I know I'm probably, you know, over the line now, so I'm just gonna be quiet. But I'm just so grateful that you guys have done everything necessary to be who you are and to create this opportunity for the rest of us. I'm so privileged to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And
Mm.
this was another case that how we can do spaces. And this was a really, really good question. I hope everyone here learned from that experience. For those requesting the mic, we're sorry. We're going to end the space very soon because our speakers and guests today, they do have to go to other spaces as well. Next we have Billy and Jay Brown, and then I will be closing remarks. So go.
Well, thank you very much for having me, AC. I got to tell you, that's some interesting stuff you have going on there. The only thing that I can maybe bring up that isn't discussed a whole lot is the people that listen to a space, but they don't necessarily participate. And I know that there's always a push to get people to participate because that's kind of like the whole gig. You know, it's live, you know, it's interaction. You can get immediate responses. You can ask immediate questions and da 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 da. And sometimes somebody brings up another idea and you go that direction. You know, that's all absolutely true. However, I can tell you that listeners, and I don't really have an explanation for why this happens. When I did stand up when I did stand up comedy a number of years ago, it was often a topic with us as comedians how crowds would adopt a personality. They would adopt a certain mood without talking to each other. They would all laugh at the same things. Uh, the same jokes would fall flat, and if the crowd became hostile, they seemed to do so non-verbally. It's not like they talked to each other and said, hey, you know, I don't, this guy here, he's really pissing me off. It didn't happen that way. There was this collective personality that the crowd would have. And as somebody who's been in those situations, I can tell you I've noticed it to a lesser degree, but it's still there with the listeners that you have in the room. So one of the things, or in the space, one of the things that I will do is I will kind of scan through the space and take a look at the avatars that are in there. And if I can, sometimes it's hard when
If you're
you're
lost,
doing a
yeah.
space, I'll sometimes just pop open. What's that? You there?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can hear you, Billy.
Yes, go
Oh,
ahead,
okay.
Billy.
I thought George said he lost me.
Yeah, I didn't hear.
Okay. But anyway, okay, so anyway, I always I'm very conscious of the observance factor. You know, it's just like a watch pot never
Hmm.
boils. And there's been scientific experiments on you know, on the atomic level, how certain reactions will behave one way when they're being observed and when they're not. So I'm always very conscious of the effect that people that are just listening have. And I know it's real easy to dismiss them. You know, you got to concentrate on the speakers and the people that are listening. Well, they're just listening to what's going on. But I always, in the back of my mind, I'm conscious of who is in the space. I don't know if it has something that you can measure, but I do believe it brings a dynamic to the space that you don't have when you just ignore the people in the room that are just listening. So anyway, I'll bring that up
And
there, and there you go.
Can I answer that with, years in radio broadcasting, we have a phone line where people can call in and just back to the nuances, what I spoke to before, you have to be ego and egoless at the same time. And so when you are ego and egoless at the same time, you are just relaxed and you're focused on just your message, your heart, and what you have to, convey. And so I think that that's a really interesting thing you point up about the group dynamics of the actual energy in the room and how it can change. It's a fascinating thing that I would love to see somebody like, a scientist look at that and say, what is it that creates that energy shift and change from one city or one room to another? It's very fascinating. I could spend a long time thinking about that.
Yes, thank you very much for the comments. It's a very interesting dynamic, and like I said, if you ever get a chance to talk to a stand-up comedian, you can ask them about that, and I guarantee you, you'll get an opinion. Yeah.
In group dynamics, it's called contagion. You can look it up.
And it's amazing watching how groups change with audio and group conformity as well. Thank you so much, Billy, for your golden nuggets. We can never get enough of those. Everyone, please, if you want to understand the genesis of audio equipment, you have Daryl, you have Billy D's here. Those are national treasures. Learn from them, DM them, watch their spaces, learn how they use their equipment. I had an amazing episode with Billy D's. We called it The Art of Audio Content, and we dissected all of that together. And it was just such an amazing, I still call it masterclass because it was really a masterclass. Our last speaker, we have Jay Brown. Jay Brown, because we're closing the space very soon. Just briefly, let us know if you have a question or a contribution, and then I will end up with my tips for you and our last remarks.
Okay, thank you, AC. George, it's good speaking with you again. We connected a while back. Most of my spaces are normally geared to the stock population, the retail investors. And in my trials of running spaces, what I always relied on was connection. And of course, the nuances that you guys are talking about right now, I had to learn the hard way. But mostly I depended upon my own set degree, which is history, of understanding that humans are always in the stage of discovery. And the only thing that stops that discovery is, of course, life, things that happen in life. And when I run my spaces, I pretty much run my spaces from a feeling type of sense. I feel my space. I'm energized by the ups, I'm energized by the lows, and it keeps everybody engaged to a point to where the conversation can go one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, but yet everybody participates. I do have people that just get in and just listen, and that's okay. And what I make sure that I try to tell everybody is that as long as you're participating, that's fine. When you feel comfortable enough to come up and speak, you will. But every now and then I'll aim to where I'll just scroll through and just send somebody a co-host or send somebody a speaker role. And what I tell them why I do this is because I want you to get out of your comfort zone and open your own space. I want to influence you to be the best you that you can be, as opposed to you just listening to me and the normal speaker speak every day. I want you to use your voice. Your voice matters. You are enough, so on and so forth. So sometimes we may go into something and somebody just shares something that they've been wanting to get off their chest for a while, and they cry, and the next thing you know, we're laughing, and the next thing you know, we're talking about the market, we're talking about all kind of things. It's just, I believe in organic connection, because organic connection can't be forced. It's something that has to meld on its own, and when it does that, it's hard to be broken. Because if I walk past AC and I step on her foot and we have an organic connection, she's not going to take it any kind of way when I say, excuse me. Her response, her immediate reaction to me is not going to be in a negative way. But moving around spaces with, made up names, not your real picture, things not from your real life, I believe having connection spaces, and I do educational spaces about the market. And there's a difference between the two. The educational spaces are more refined and reformed with panels. And the organic connection spaces is, it doesn't matter who you are, what stock you hold, what crypto you hold, whatever, you're welcome to come and speak. And going through that process of growth of myself to stay in continuous discovery and not be stopped by the nuances of course, we all know to be Twitter. social media gives you that extra boost of courage. But what we often don't realize is that some people still have a deep, discerning fear of sharing their true personality. So you have to foster a room of welcoming, regardless of.
Hmm.
And sometimes you achieve it, sometimes you don't. But every now and then, what I make sure I try to do is that I entered this thing knowing one thing: I have to remove all of my biases. I'm a 45-year-old black man that grew up in the South. It's crazy of me to think I don't have inherent bias, but this is my opportunity to get people to see how much alike each other they are. And if I move away from that path,
Here,
then
here.
therefore I'm defeating the purpose of what I'm here to do. I'm here to grow. I'm here to learn. I'm here to share. I'm here to connect. And I stay consistent with that, even when I'm annoyed. Like you had the issue yesterday, George. I was in a space. I got called a racial slur. I got called out of my name. I stayed calm. What I did was open up another space to get that love back in me. And I didn't realize that I was still mad. And a friend came up and he said the derogatory word, but he didn't say the racial slur. And he was talking to the whole room, and this is what he always does. And I flashed out. So, what that let me know is that even though I may think I'm over something, as the host of that space, I apologized to him in a DM and I apologized on Twitter because I'm a man. I can apologize publicly. If I shame you publicly, I'm going to apologize publicly as well. And that way, I don't desecrate the amount of connection I've made. I don't desecrate the amount of consistency I've had in the 2 years that I've been doing it. People often forget that history is history, it doesn't erase. You can't be all negative in for 6 months and then on month 7 you decide to be positive. People will still remember your history. The only thing that can erase it is consistency. So I think it's just making sure that my spaces are more consistently and conform to where if it's education, it's strictly about that to get to the end result. If it's about connection, there is a result. It's about people organically connecting and not having to choose between one or the other. If people fall out, let those two adults settle it and keep pushing forward. So I know that was lit, but I've been waiting to talk to Joyce for a while because, like I said, we connected a while back, and I share a lot because I want people to start thinking. I
Thanks.
want people to think outside of the bubble.
Uh,
So appreciate you guys for having me.
Thanks. Love that attitude.
Thank you, Brown, for coming here and sharing
Yeah,
this
exactly.
because this is the essence of the power of social audio. You took us through a whole journey of how to deal with negative spaces, how to be authentic in spaces, how to transform your passion into an actual message and connect with other people authentically. These are the things that we here as the group teach to everyone that we meet around and that we do in our spaces as well. So this was a live example of what exactly we were trying to talk about today. This right here. And I hope everyone was listening to Brown. This is an amazing example because listen, people, you will be in those negative spaces. You will be attacked. You will be called names. You will go through a lot as a host, as a co-host, as a speaker, whatever it is. As a listener, you will be attacked. So one of the things as a host, you have the responsibility of guiding your conversations, having a safe, making sure that this is a safe space, and making sure that this is a place where exactly you indicate what is this for. As this is your responsibility as a host, so you have to do that. As a co-host, your job is there. You have to communicate that with the co-host as well. As a speaker, you have to be respectful of the rules of the space. As a listener, make sure that you are providing the support and it being interactive in the chat, sharing. If you like something, share it with the host. It doesn't matter how big their accounts are, if because we dedicate a lot of time to be in a space. These hosts, they don't, some do, some will just turn on the button and just start. But for a lot of other people, this is a lot of work, preparation, and time from their day, and making sure they listen, and mental health and all of that. So make sure you give back to the community as much as the value that you're getting, even more. So this is the power of social audio. It's huge. but it is a big responsibility. And for those who are wondering, thank you so much for leaving us all those amazing nuggets in the chat. We're going to reply to all of them one by one. Please make sure you check the nest and learn from these resources. We're available if you need any help with any spaces or you need guidance. We're very experienced in this. So make sure you reach out to everyone. Just start. This is one of the things that it's available to you. It's a tool. It's for free. Don't be afraid. Just start and practice and master your skill. And trust me, you will get there, and you will, looking back at how you started, you'll regret that you did not start. These are my last thoughts for you. I hope that you enjoyed this space today. I hope that you have been empowered, that you have been inspired, and now you have the full permission to go and blow your message out. This is the Conversationalist. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay tuned. Make sure that you follow all of us here so you can stay tuned with the new episodes. Check out the nest. Take care and have an amazing Saturday.